Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Jesse Lin. I'm from the World Economic Forum, and I'm currently based in San Francisco. Thank you to those that have joined this virtual session on international trade and logistics during the pandemic. And thank you especially to the government of Azerbaijan for putting together this global web forum. I lead the forum's initiative on trade tech, focusing on the impact of technologies on trade. And there's no better time to discuss how technologies are helping to solve some of the challenges that we're currently facing in this pandemic. However, this pandemic also stretches beyond technological challenges. There are uncertainties on the economic impact and recovery, the lack of and export restrictions on personal protective equipment and medical supplies, and the need for consistency in defining essential businesses and workers' movement. While a lot of us have transitioned to working from home and to hosting virtual meetings like we're now, there is more than ever a need to share successful experiences and stress the usefulness of mutual support during this time. During this 40-minute session, we will hear insights from each one of our distinguished panelists. And if time permits, we'll also be addressing questions towards the end of the session. Today, we're joined by 4 experts. Mr. Taleh Ziyadov, the Director General of Baku International Sea Trade Port, Dr. Jan Hoffmann, the Chief of Trade Logistics Branch at UNCTAD, Mr. Murat Seitnepesov, the President of the Greater Caspian Association, and Mr. Maxi, who is an expert on trade logistics with the International Trade Center. Now, Taleh, I would like to start with you. Ports are essential logistics hubs, and the pandemic has certainly impacted transportation and trade overall. What is your assessment on the impact of COVID-19 on regional global trade, and what are some measures that you have taken within the Port of Baku to curb the impact of the pandemic?
Thank you very much, Jesse, and I welcome other participants and everyone who is watching. Obviously, this pandemic is quite devastating for international trade, but I would like to draw your attention to countries like Azerbaijan in our region. Obviously, for all of you, if you look at the map, we are a landlocked country. And the majority of landlocked countries that exist in the world also present in this region. So Central Asia, some of them are double landlocked. So in this context, obviously, this pandemic has, in a way, multiple challenges, meaning you don't have access to oceans, so you have to be delivering your supplies through land, either by rail or by trucks or by air, which is quite expensive. So all the countries that neighboring Azerbaijan, suddenly Azerbaijan became a lifeline for them. Because as you know, after China, the spread of pandemic was in Iran, and Iran is also one of these transit routes for Central Asia from Turkey. And basically we have seen a dramatic jump in traffic, particularly truck traffic, through Central Asia and from Central Asia. So because Azerbaijan government initially in January decided that it is not going to close its borders to transit traffic. And that was essential because not only for Azerbaijan, but also for entire Central Asian countries. The majority of goods that were going to Central Asia were actually coming from Europe or Turkey. And Azerbaijan's decision to keep the borders open for that transit was essential. But what happened? Imagine suddenly our turnover increased by about 23%, and at least trucks increased by about 22%, and suddenly we had a pile of close to 800 to 1,000 trucks piled up in the port. And just imagine, we have this pandemic, and how you are going to be sure that these truck drivers are not, positive, so that they can spread and close and actually cause the closure of the port. So what we did immediately, we drafted a procedure for COVID-19 case, and this procedure involved dividing the zone, dividing the port into different zones. So first what we did, we separated ferry terminal, ro-ro terminal, and general cargo terminal, restricted access to each of them, so that if we find someone, for example, positive in ro-ro, we close ro-ro, so the other parts of the port is still operational. Then we required that every every truck driver that comes to port is first gets into a zone A, as we call it, quarantine zone, where they are tested. Within 7-8 hours, their results are known, and then we'll let them into the port. So in a way, we tested everyone inside the port, and we had a very strict rules to make sure that inside the port is kept a sterilized zone. Then obviously the challenge was, because the traffic was still flowing, we looked at the majority of cargo that comes to port and goes to Central Asia comes from Georgia, the Georgian-Azerbaijani border. So we decided it's essential to have similar system that we have in the port, do it at the border area. So since late March, we started doing the same procedures at the border, together with the customs agency and our local medical, the agency called Tabib, responsible for all the tests as well, and a private company medical company that tests the truck drivers. So with every truck that enters from Georgia-Azerbaijan border on the way to the port, they first get into a quarantine zone. They are restricted from obviously talking to each other. Disinfection facilities there are disinfected every hour or two immediately after, for example, they use, let's say, toilet facilities, etc. They are being disinfected. And once their results are known, a police escort guides them all the way to the port. So basically, we started from late March, early April, receiving already tested, kind of in a way clean, without positive result, drivers that come to port. So these procedures are done now at the border area of Georgia-Azerbaijan border and also at the port area. And obviously Russia, and there is also a traffic between Russia and Iran, which is also another important traffic that goes on. And from the beginning, Azerbaijan government decided that for transit cargo, there is going to be non-stop interaction basically between two borders. So if a truck arrives at the Russian-Azerbaijan border from the north, they are escorted directly to the Azerbaijan-Iranian border without any interactions on the way. They have one spot to fill their gas and maybe to eat, and then they continue. So all these measures, I think they have proven to be very effective. We identified about 7 positives in this, and without these kind of measures, I think the numbers would have been much higher. We have tested close to 4,000 kind of truck drivers, staff, and everyone else in the process, and this process still is continuing, and we share this experience with our Central Asian colleagues, and I think some of them also now applying the similar system at their border areas.
Great, thank you so much, Taleh, and thank you for sharing that important insight on kind of the new procedure that the port has taken to address this pandemic, and I think that's certainly interesting, the different zones that you mentioned to keep that quarantine, which is crucial not just at the port but also between borders. So quite a fascinating experience that you're sharing. Next, I'd like to go to Jan. The pandemic has certainly increased the demand for PPE and medical supplies, which really leading to challenges in expediting imports and exports of those goods. What are some recommendations to ensure trade and physical flow of goods to remain open, and how do you see the impact of the pandemic on developing countries?
Yes, very happy to say hello. I was going to say back to Baku after a long time, but actually, no, I'm still here in Geneva, in my home office. And what we had discussed, what I will share with you, is a 10-point action plan that we developed at UNCTAD, which we hope will help achieve both, will facilitate trade and the logistics of trade, and at the same time keep us and transport workers and populations safe. So let us see if that works now with the share screen. We practiced it 3 times before, so let's see if it still and again works. And I will now click here on the screen, and you should now be seeing something that says international trade and logistics during pandemic. Can somebody just nod or say yes, you see it?
Yes, we do. Thanks, John.
Good, excellent. So it's about our 10-point action plan based on the policy brief. But at the outset, let me share with you data we just launched this week, a nowcast. What will happen to trade? A nowcast is like a forecast of what we expect will be measured. So the current second quarter, we do not yet know the trade statistics, but based on existing indicators, the UNCTAD nowcast suggests a decline of 27% of global trade. And this is really, really bad. What are the underlying causes? They are, of course, very, very manifold. But if I take the wisdom of the crowd from a Twitter poll that I had launched there, you could say that maybe half is demand, half is supply. I actually personally think the current problems are more on the supply side. And about 1/4 said logistics are the issue. So let us work on the logistics solutions. Here's our policy brief, and I will go from left to right along the supply chain, from the ships to the port, to leaving the port, to transit, to information, to the landlocked country. So let us go along 10 points. Number 1, seafarers are critical personnel for whom teleworking is not possible. So governments need to allow that crews board their ships for the or be repatriated from any seaport in the world. Number 2, the ships arrive in the port. And ports need to remain open. Most ports, almost all, have managed to remain open. Congratulations. We have prepared a technical note on port operations that provides concrete good practices to protect port personnel while maintaining efficient port operations. We need also to protect trade of critical goods. There are several specific trade facilitation measures that can be particularly useful to speed up clearance and release of critical goods. Sanitary and health restrictions should not become a disguised barrier to trade. Then we need to facilitate cross-border transport. The trucks, trains, aeroplanes, and their transport workers need to be able to cross borders in order to keep supply chains functioning. Then we move to the transit. So the landlocked and transit countries need to maintain their access to seaports. Many of them are very concerned, very worried currently. And we support cooperation among transit countries and landlocked countries through our Empowerment Program for National Transit Coordinators and through Transport Corridor Program and Customs Automation. In times of this rapidly changing trade environment, transparency and up-to-date information is key. So it is important to communicate clearly and ensure information is available to all actors and stakeholders. We have a number of trade information portals run by UNCTAD. We also collaborate there with the ITC, and this is continuously being updated. We need even more today go paperless. The processes need to be dematerialized, including through automation, electronic payments, and the acceptance of digital copies. We also need to address legal implications. There are unprecedented disruptions that give rise to a plethora of legal issues. So industry and traders need to be encouraged to waive some of their legal rights. That's not a legal perspective, but more a pragmatic and economist perspective. We also need to protect both the shippers and the service providers. So the economic emergency and social protection measures need to include the international logistics industry. At the same time, governments should also ensure that carriers, like the providers, do not impose undue fees and charges if to the shippers in this current situation. So these were point 1 to 9, and all this requires technical assistance. Even before the current pandemic took hold, many developing countries were already confronted with challenges to undertake the necessary investments. So our UNCTAD supports includes tailor-made advisory services, research, capacity building programs in the areas of international transport, services and legislation, port management, trade and transit facilitation, and customs automation. Having gone through these 10 points, one last point and an extra key message. Is there a trade-off between controls and trade facilitation? No. I think many of us have seen PowerPoints, I won't mention names of people, organizations, that pretend that there's a balance, like a trade-off. So I've taken a photo of a balance I have here at home and say, no, it's not a balance. The concrete measures proposed in our policy brief and in this presentation I just gave, they had to facilitate both. They facilitate transport and trade facilitation, and they protect the population from COVID-19. And I think it's very important key takeaway, I hope, from this session, when you want to have trade and logistics in this pandemic. We are not saying, nobody says we should not control and protect, but we are working on a large number of very good practical solutions that help achieve both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you for sharing those 10-point action plan. Actually, quite a few of those you mentioned: uninterrupted shipping, relating to essential workers, ports that need to remain open, relates to essential businesses, the protect trade of critical goods, relating to PPE, going paperless, digitalization, and these are the themes that we're certainly seeing. So I really thank you for sharing insights on that. I think that's quite informative. Now, Murat, I would like to come to you. As a business leader with expertise in the greater Caspian region, what is the current situation in the region as it relates to challenges as well as opportunities that you see?
Thank you, Jesse. First of all, I would like to express our gratitude to Azerbaijan government for the organizing of the Global Web Forum, an invitation to the Caspian Week to the partner of this event. This is a great event with significant importance for the greater Caspian region, for the whole world. I'm living and working in Geneva in Switzerland, but originally I'm from Turkmenistan, which is on the other side of the Caspian Sea from Azerbaijan. That's why I know the problems of the region. I was living there and I'm still working there and doing business there. And I would like to describe what it is, Greater Caspian region. Just 1 second, we will check that presentation is there. No, there is no presentation. Yes.
For some reason.
Okay, I will continue. Yes, later on we will give the presentation. First, I would like to describe the Greater Caspian region. And this region, there's 15 countries, all countries surrounding Caspian and Black Seas, and also countries in the Central Asia, up to the Chinese border. It's 500 million people and 5 million square kilometers. This region is already very important for the world economy, but will be more important in the future, because this is one of the few potential points of growth for the world economy. I'm representing here the Greater Caspian Association, which is organizing Caspian Week Forum in Davos. We created a platform for global ideas and gathering more than 100 speakers and 2,000 delegates every year to discuss potential of the Greater Caspian region and global issues. We have 3 main goals we are trying to achieve. First is promotion of the Greater Caspian region to the big world, and promotion of the big world into the Greater Caspian region. Development of economic, business, political, cultural, educational, and scientific relations between the Greater Caspian region and the world. Second is improvement of the relations between people, businesses, and governments inside the Greater Caspian region to reduce or even remove open and hidden tensions. And third is implementing of the new technologies and innovations from the big world into the Greater Caspian region. And this is especially important now because of the COVID crisis and the following economic crisis. And COVID pandemic effectiveness of international relations, both multilateral and bilateral. At the end, practically each country fighting with COVID on its own. We even saw some cases where governments were fighting with each other for particular loss of masks and medical equipment, which is not the correct way for doing things. Even sometimes businesses and companies misusing COVID regulations in order to follow their own interests and agenda. We have even example in the Greater Caspian region, like company Astrans which is operating the terminal. World economy, and particular Greater Caspian region economy, is under major stress. At the same time, a few days ago, World Health Organization official made statement that we will probably live with COVID for a really long time. And the post-crisis recovery of the economy is under questions. And which solutions do we have? We believe that, first of all, we need to restore and improve international cooperation. A role of international organizations should be significantly improved. For example, we can see increasing activity of World Economic Forum with regards to the COVID crisis. And we are participating in the various webinars and discussions how to help the world to fight the COVID crisis. Also, very important, the new role could be played by regional cooperation organizations, for example, like Greater Caspian Association. These organizations should get first trust of people, businesses, and governments. And we should join our force to fight with COVID and future challenges and to recover the economy. Now, with regard to the proposals from the Greater Caspian Association, first, we think it will be vital to create Protection and Stabilization and Development Fund of the Greater Caspian region with participation of businesses, governments, international financial institutions, which will finance innovative business projects, researches in optimization of supply chains, logistics, and trading, researches in predicting and supporting actions in case of emergency situations like COVID, earthquakes, floods, and so on. Scientific researches in the field of medicine, genetics, and biotechnology. Joint production of protective equipment and medications for the existing and future disease. Second proposal is that we believe that it should be organized the multilateral intergovernmental commission with the participation of the governments, businesses, international regional organizations, and association of development for development of logistics in the Greater Caspian region. Logistics is the blood of the economy and exceptionally important for the Greater Caspian region, which is mainly landlocked, like already mentioned by Taleh, Ziyadov from Baku port. Now, with regard to the logistics solution, invention and implementation of logistics schemes and supply chains with minimal involvement of the people, which will help to continue normal operations for the businesses during COVID and similar crises. Meanwhile, preventing COVID spread through the borders, ports, transshipment, and transshipment points. And I'm very impressed by the work which was done by Baku, port of Baku, with regards to these quarantine measures to prevent COVID spreading in Azerbaijan. For example, we can widely use smart containers, smart trailers, automatic systems of loading and discharge of cargoes, relevant optimization of logistics, creating of regional e-commerce marketplaces. And we are really happy to see that members of the Greater Caspian Association already actively working on these schemes. For example, Caspian Container Company, in cooperation with Port of Baku and the railways, already implementing an innovative anti-COVID compliant logistics solution for transportation of fertilizers. There are photos on the presentation. Unfortunately, it was not possible to put here, but we'll provide the presentation later. All these initiatives could be later implemented on the global level. And it is very important that governments of the countries from the Greater Caspian region, international organizations will support these initiatives. We all hope that this support will be provided, and this will help to fight with COVID and future challenges and speed up economic recovery of the Greater Caspian region. Altogether, we can do a lot of good things for our region. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Murat, for that. And I ran into some technical difficulties, so we'll make sure to share the slide after this session. And I think, great points there that you mentioned, multilateral, intergovernmental participation and kind of that private-public partnership and cooperation that's needed during this time. It's not really the time to close off trade. and it's actually a time to facilitate. And so thank you for sharing those initiatives that you're quite critical in hosting in the greater Caspian region.
Thank you.
Lastly, I'd like to introduce Max, who is the expert in trade logistics with the International Trade Center. What do you see as the lasting impact of the pandemic for developing a robust regional trade and logistic network?
Thank you, Jesse. Hello, this is Max from sunny Singapore. A very good day to the government of Republic of Azerbaijan, policymakers, private sector, and our fellow panelists. Thanks for this opportunity. I think the Global Web Forum is a very timely thing. Now that we know that COVID-19 has severe repercussions and the oil price, unfortunately, is going to remain at maybe $30 at most until the end of this year. So referring to Jesse, your question about the impacts, actually International Trade Center in 2019, under the project Ready to Trade and EU for Business initiative, right? In 2019, we have actually partnered with many stakeholders in Azerbaijan, including the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Economy, us Promo, and the different private sector representatives. And we have actually done a very in-depth study, what is the way forward. This is all coincided with the Azerbaijan government. They have developed a strategic roadmap for logistics and trade development for the Republic of Azerbaijan, right? And inside there are many strategies which we have extended our thoughts on. So I think what we see is that now there's a severe dislocation of demand and supply, right? For example, global food chain, right? There is apparently a high demand, but the supply, because the workers, the drivers, transporters are not allowed to go to work, right? Not running at full capacity. So there's a huge backlog of trucks, like what Taleh mentioned before that. At the border, you can actually see 800 trucks to 1,000 trucks queuing to cross the land border, right? This is a severe problem and it takes time to resolve, right? But at the same time, it becomes more pressing to actually adopt measures that can address long-standing and structural barriers and inefficiencies. So if I may share some of the key findings that we have, let me show the video mode. So what ITC has done is we have actually did in-depth study and recommendations titled Developing Export Logistics in the Republic of Azerbaijan. And this is reference to the government strategic roadmap that was done in 2017. Okay, basically, as you can see, there are objectives on the social economic benefits, employment, and so on. And the main action plan, this was what I also learned from Dr. Yan, all right? It has a 10 points action plan. And over here in the framework under ITC, we actually have identified 15 recommendations, right? The top 5 of them required public sector intervention, right? And they are strategic at that level. And the remaining 10 actions are classified according to the 3 I's: infrastructure improvements, industry improvements, and institutional collaboration. So because of time, perhaps I will elaborate on the first 5 areas, right? So in Azerbaijan, we noticed that there's ADY that focus on train transport, all right? And Baku seaport, of course, for water transport. And you have Silkway that's focusing on aviation sector. So can we have actually a multimodal transport operator? This MTO is a very important concept that allows a company to provide a one-stop shop services from origin to destination. So one of the recommendation is to create a joint stock company, right, that we call National Logistics Company, NLC for short, right? And this actually can provide a point-to-point services using different mode of transportation. There's one example in the region, right, in Central Asia, where I spend actually more time compared to Singapore, right? I spend a lot of time in Central Asia and Caucasus. So Kazakhstan Termir Zoli, which is the national railway operator, they have refashioned themselves into an integrated logistics service provider, right? And they have entered into business such as e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, and also running warehouses in special economic zones. The second recommendation deal with increasing scheduled express trains, right? Fellow logisticians and transport operators will know that China now actually under the Chongqing-Duisburg line, you can send a 40-foot container from Chongqing to Duisburg in Germany within 11 to 12 days, all right? So currently, ADY Express actually run the Nomad Express, all right, that links China to Turkey. That's through Azerbaijan. And currently, the expected volume will reach 300,000 TEUs by the year 2020, pre-COVID situation. So what we see is that there's potential for us to actually increase and help to increase the frequency of the express train, right, to connect places like China to Azerbaijan to Europe. So in effect, this can actually move goods very fast because as DG Taleh observed, seaports are running and land border crossing points. Azerbaijan may be an exception because many Central Asian countries did close a lot of their borders during the COVID-19 crisis, right? However, you notice that rail service is still running, all right, especially for freight trains. So there's definitely a potential to increase that frequency. Third part is actually related to what DG Taleh regarding the Baku International Trade Seaport, all right? Currently now, Baku Port focus on domestic investment and operations. So before this panel, we had a conversation with DG Taleh, and actually now we think that we can actually support Baku Seaport in terms of international cross-border investment. For example, having a presence in the port of Anaklia at the Black Sea, right? This will allow Azerbaijan to monitor the supply chain along the 850 kilometers railway track from Azerbaijan to Georgia, right? Even maybe having a terminal there for repacking and relabeling of items in compliance to EU standards before entering, all right? You know that sending a wagon can carry 60 tons of capacity, right? So it makes sense to send items on train wagons, right? And do the repacking, resorting at the seaport and stuff into a container before the container set sails across the Black Sea to Europe territory. On the fourth recommendation, this actually is what we call a springboard air corridor. You know that during this crisis, a lot of air freight rates have gone crazy, right? It has tripled in prices. So to support the aviation industry, luckily, Azerbaijan has a very good freight forwarder carrier, which is the Silkway, right? And we think that in extending the advantage, we can actually help to create more air corridors using Baku, right? The international airport as a hub, right? This has been done successfully in Navoy, which is a free industrial economic zone in Uzbekistan, right? So why do we say that? It's because if we have a freighter plane, let's say Boeing 747F, right, that flies directly from Europe to, let's say, east and southeast part of Asia, it would be more than 10,000 kilometers and it's very expensive, right? Can we consider the aircraft landing in Baku International Airport, right, Hida Aliyev, and then do MRO, right, or do collection of other goods before continuing to destinations like Shanghai, Hong Kong, or Singapore? That's what we call the springboard air hub strategy. And finally, one very important aspect is the construction and the operation of logistics parks. In the government strategic plan, they mentioned about logistics centers, right? But logistics park is even a bigger concept where you have an integrated zone of land providing one-stop shop services, let's say modern distribution centers, e-fulfillment centers for e-commerce, right? Consolidation, deconsolidation, container freight stations, right? And certain areas in Azerbaijan, the locations are ideal for this kind of development. So final remarks, final remarks is that we like to actually continue our work with the Ministry of Economy, right, once the COVID-19 has passed, right, to expand on these recommendations and to assess its feasibility, right? And I will leave the contact details on the screen. And anybody who is interested can actually feel free to contact us for this session. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Max, and thank you for sharing this framework for strategic actions. It's quite detailed and very informative there. It seems like we have a few minutes left for Q&A, so I think let's entertain one question. And one question I think, based on what we heard from our four speakers today, is, do you think the new procedures and processes and this one particularly addressed to Taleh, but if other people like to chime in on this, but what do you see as the procedures and processes currently implemented during the pandemic? Do you see them to continue after the pandemic? Do you see these new processes and procedures to continue, and what do you see that new normal as? Of course, opening the floor to everyone, and noted that we probably have 2 minutes left, so if you can keep their remarks brief if possible.
Thank you, Jesse. Quite important presentations. I took a lot of notes. Obviously, there are automation, harmonization of anti-COVID procedures. This is very important. Containerization process that is going to take on a lead. And logistical service, additional logistical services that will be introduced to ease kind of this supply-demand side. These are very important. What I see as a problem is the following. As I mentioned, we saw immediate increase in truck traffic, for example, through Port of Baku in the first couple of months. And then we started to see a slight decline. The reason for a slight decline was not because trucks do not want to come to Port of Baku, but because the end kind of destination countries, they started closing the borders with their neighbors. So there was a situation when the trucks were destined for Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, but they had to pass through either Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan. So initially Turkmenistan closed all the border for all the trucks except for Turkmen's trucks and started to accept only semi-trailers. For example, currently any traffic that goes that way is only semi-trailers or a Turkmen driver, which is tested in the port. Through Kazakhstan, it was allowed, but after a while, Kazakhstan realized that they let these truck drivers come in and they get stuck on the border with Uzbekistan or other borders, and they pile up on their territory. So this became a problem. So they kind of issued a decree that they no longer accept trucks that go to a country that is closed border with Kazakhstan. So these things obviously have to be sorted out. And I think the procedures that we have done in the border, for example, with Georgia or at the port, we should somehow harmonize and make sure that every country kind of accepts the test that we have conducted on their side, so that throughput that is going through them is also kind of going to be much smoother. Without this, we are going to see this sporadic kind of confused and often changing policies that are going to disrupt this entire flow. So we have to adopt a rather sustainable, understandable, clear, reasonable procedures for even post-COVID pandemic era, because it seems like this era is going to last at least for another 6 months or so, and maybe more. But even after that, we have to have a clear understanding and how this transit traffic is going to follow, and make sure that everybody is on the board and shares the same vision and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Taleh, for that. I think we just might be about out of time, so apologies that we weren't able to address more questions. And I think this is certainly a very fascinating discussion that we're having. We've heard great insights from each one of our panelists today, on the new quarantine procedures in ports, on the impact of the pandemic, and the action plans and the strategic frameworks that we can implement to curb this pandemic. There are new challenges, but also opportunities during this pandemic for more public-private cooperation. I'd like to thank all the panelists this afternoon and thank the government of Azerbaijan for hosting this virtual forum. And thank you to those that really attended today's virtual session, and we hope that you have taken valuable insights away from it. There will be music compositions by volunteers after this panel, and then the Global Web Forum will continue the conversation with panel 4 on the post-pandemic world, realities versus illusions. Thank you all for joining this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you from Geneva. Congrats. Thank you all.
I've been here before, but always hit the floor. I spent a lifetime running, and I always get away. But with you, I'm feeling something that makes me want to stay. I'm prepared for this. I never shoot to miss, but I feel like a storm is coming. If I'm gonna make it through the day, then there's no more use in running. This is something I gotta face. If I risk it all, could you break my fall? And how do I live? How do I breathe? When you're not here, I'm suffocating. I wanna feel alone, where's my blow? Tell me, is this where I give it all up? For you, I have to risk it all, 'cause the writing's on the wall. A million shots of glass that hung me from my past. As the stars begin to gather and the light begins to fade, when our hope begins to shatter, know that I won't be afraid. If I risk it all, could you break my fall? And how do I live? How do I breathe? When you're not here, I'm suffocating. I wanna feel alone, what's in my blood? Tell me, is this where I give it all up? For you, I have to risk it all, 'cause the writing's on the wall. The writing's on the wall. For you, I have to risk it.